Today we are solving all of your apple pie problems and getting you ready to rock the dessert table this Thanksgiving. We'll also boost your baking confidence tenfold because this is the video where I have a major, I'm talking major screw up. But I prefer to think about it as an opportunity to learn about thermodynamics of pie plates. It's a very exciting topic that we will cover later in the video. Make your pie dough at least a day ahead. I have several videos on that already and they are linked below. When making your dough, divide it slightly unevenly so that you end up with a bigger circle for the bottom of the pie plate and a smaller circle for the top. A good filling starts with the right apple. The most reliable apple to use for baking is honeycrisp. That's what I have here. It has a great sweet-tart balance and holds its shape beautifully. Other good options are Golden Delicious and Granny Smith. But the first one is too sweet and the second one is too tart. So you'll need to adjust the amount of lemon juice accordingly. Stay away from Max and Cortlands. They will turn to mush. Cut the flesh of the apples off around the core and slice them thickly. They will shrink a lot. For a 9-inch pie plate, you'll need 5 pounds of apples. Almost all the filling problems can be solved with a simple step of pre-cooking your apples before putting them into the crust. This releases their pectin, which acts as a thickener, eliminating the need for cornstarch or flour. It also pre-shrinks the apples so that you won't have that annoying gap under your crust. Yeah, you know that domed crust with a huge gap before you get to the filling? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And it allows you to make your filling a day ahead. Most recipes simmer the apples gently with sugar, but I was hoping to bring the caramelized flavor of a French galette to my apple pie and decided to brown the apples. Let's set a pan over medium-high heat, add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil and wait for the oil to shimmer. Swirl the pan and add about half the apples. I'm doing this in a huge 12-inch skillet with straight sides. If you have a smaller pan, you'll have to do it in 3 to 4 batches. Arrange the apples so that they make as much contact with the pan as possible. And then leave them alone until they brown. Give them a stir and cook the other side. You don't need to be too conscientious with browning both sides. Even browning one side will give your pie amazing flavor. When the first batch is done, add more oil and brown the second batch of apples. When all the apples are brown, take the pan off heat. Return all the apples to the pan and add half a teaspoon of cinnamon. I hate cinnamon actually, so if I was making the pie for myself, I would skip it. I feel that it obscures the flavor of the apples. But no American dessert seems to be complete without it. So here we go. Add 1/3 of a cup of granulated sugar and 1 tablespoon lemon juice. Taste your filling and adjust as necessary. Granny Smiths might need a bit more sugar and Golden Delicious might need more lemon juice. Move your filling into a container. Cool to room temperature before use and refrigerate overnight if desired. It is very important to cool your filling. Do not put hot filling directly into the crust or the crust will be soggy. Psst, don't tell anyone, but I haven't baked a pie in 10 years. I know. So French galettes are just so much easier and tastier that I still don't get the appeal of an American pie. But since an American pie is what we're baking today, I thought I should do some research on what the leading authorities have to say about pie plates, oven temperatures, and timing. So I've consulted the New York Times, Cooks Illustrated, Rose Levy Berenbaum, many baking forums, and the advice I got was numerous and contradictory. But 2 tips seem to have emerged as being very common. One is to bake on a pizza stone or a preheated baking sheet, and 2 was to use a glass pie plate. This didn't make intuitive sense to me because glass is a really poor conductor compared to metal. But the proponents of glass said something about the radiation getting through the glass, not through metal, so thus glass bakes better. Some of them even suggested lowering the oven temperature if baking in glass. All this advice was making my head hurt, so I decided to just go ahead and bake a pie and see what happens. I used a glass dish, placed it on a pizza stone, and ta-da! Looks good, right? My friends, don't believe all the pretty pictures of food. Underneath all this beauty is a raw bottom crust. This has never happened to me when baking galettes. Though I bake them on metal baking sheets or in disposable flimsy pie plates like this, and the bottom comes out crispy and flaky. To understand what happened to my pie baked in a glass dish, I decided to set up a little experiment with leftover pie dough. I fitted the dough into a glass and disposable foil pie plates and piled apples on top. Since I didn't have enough dough for the top crust, I covered the plates with vented foil to simulate a pie scenario. And I put them in the preheated 425-degree oven on a pizza stone for 30 minutes. Let's see what happened to our dough. The one baked in glass was completely raw and mushy. And the one baked in metal was brown and crisp. That was profoundly disturbing. There had to be some variable that I wasn't accounting for that allowed all those bakers to bake their pies in glass plates and have the bottom actually bake. I had to do more experiments, but unfortunately I ran out of pie dough, and since I don't have the resources of Cooks Illustrated to bake 100 pies, I switched to sugar. I baked it at 425 Fahrenheit for 20 minutes in the same oven position. But I changed the pie plates and what was underneath them. I tried baking on the preheated stone, on the preheated baking sheet, and with nothing underneath. Here are the results. Turns out, putting the stone under the glass blocked the heat from getting through the glass rather than help it. See, the sugar didn't melt at all. A baking sheet let a bit more heat through, but it wasn't until I got rid of everything under the glass pie plate that the sugar actually melted. But even the hottest the sugar got in the glass dish was nothing compared to what it did in a disposable metal dish. Since it turned so dark, it was hard to judge by the color of sugar whether the stone and baking sheet made much of a difference. I'd need more testing for that. The temperature differences between pie plates are not as dramatic as the sugar makes it look. See, the way sugar works is that once it melts, it can go from golden brown to black fairly quickly. But these differences are enough to make or break your pie. I'm not saying glass is bad for pie. I'm just saying that different pie plates require different temperatures. And if you want to experiment with your pie plate and your oven and find that perfect temperature, that's great, more power to you. But if you simply want to bake one pie this Thanksgiving and you don't want to screw it up, I suggest disposable little pie plates that you can get in any supermarket. When the time comes to bake your pie, preheat the oven to 425 Fahrenheit for at least 30 minutes with a foil-lined baking sheet in the bottom third of the oven. Roll out the dough. Place the big dough circle into the bottom of your pie plate and refrigerate both the bottom and top crusts for at least 30 minutes. This helps the gluten relax and produces dough that doesn't shrink as much and comes out more flaky. Add your filling. The pie should be very full, but don't make a big mountain. That can result in leaking. It's okay to have filling leftovers. They're great on top of pancakes or oatmeal. I'm sure you'll find a use for them. Place the smaller dough circle on top and trim the edges along the outer edge of the pie plate. I cut a little star in the middle of my top crust after rolling it out, but that's just for looks. You can simply cut the slits with a knife after you shape your pie. Venting your top crust is a must. Otherwise, the steam from the apples will have nowhere to go and you might end up with a gap under the crust. Fold the dough over and pinch it together tightly. If your dough is very stiff because it was in the fridge for a while, wait 5 to 10 minutes until it becomes pliable. I do a simple ruffled edge to reinforce my seal, but most of it will flatten out in the oven. To keep the crimping design after baking, you'd need to use some shortening or lard in your crust. But a crust like mine don't keep shape. But what this dough lacks in looks, it more than makes up for in taste. I realized that a pie on a magazine cover might have a wavy edge, but not everything you see in food magazines works in real life. Brush the top of the pie with melted butter and sprinkle with sugar. Place on the baking sheet This footage was shot before my experiments, so ignore the pizza stone and the glass plate. Bake for about an hour or until the pie is deeply brown and the apples are bubbling. Check up on your pie after 45 minutes of baking. If it's completely brown, lower the temperature to 375 Fahrenheit. Oh, and shoot for a shade darker than my pie is. It's always better to overbake than underbake. I was guilty of trying to produce what my daughter calls an Instagrammable pie and was worried that it wouldn't look as good if it got really brown. When your pie is done, you'll need to be patient. Don't even think about cutting into it for at least 3 hours to give the filling a chance to set. The filling is excellent. Each piece of apple is intact, but they're so tender and deliciously caramelized. Yes, the bottom crust is terribly raw, but what it lacks in taste, it more than makes up for in educational value. This video was brought to you by viewers like you. If you liked it, click here to support my channel. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the little bell button for notifications, and if you're ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.